This is willpower.
Welcome, Dr. Patrick Porter, who is in a very sweet way, is in my ear almost every day from BrainTap. I'm so thrilled to finally get on both of each other's schedules for this.
Yeah, it's great to be on call with you here. Not just seeing you at events.
Yeah. We had a chance to speak on a panel together last year, and just over the years, been watching you and this brand grow in such a wonderful way, and really being able to be involved in recording some tracks for you. It's gotten me deep down the rabbit hole of BrainTap and all of its beautiful benefits. But for those of us who are new listeners, or my listeners that are old school, I want to just give them the 101 on BrainTap from your perspective, because new app, new website, bright red shirt here if you're not watching on YouTube. And there's a lot of great leveling up you guys have even done in the company to be progressive.
Yeah, we're finding that app was actually supposed to come out during the Biohacking conference in September. So even though it launched in January, you know how things go. But we wanted to have a way that people could curate the offerings, because we have over 2,000 sessions now and we keep building them just for everything. So when people think about BrainTap, think about brainwave entrainment, where our body is always in training to our environment. And it actually triggers that 99% of epigenetics, because our environment is actually changing who we are. Every 40 seconds, every DNA pair is changing. It's observing its environment. So it comes in the form of light, sound, and vibration. So the body doesn't really know that there's a computer in front of us. It only knows there's vibration and frequency coming toward us. And then our sensory-based systems, like our eyes, ears, our feeling, translates that into a computer or a person or language or music. And so what we've done is the reason I think that we've got into the biohacking so strongly is because we're hacking the system. Used to be, if you wanted to relax and get into alpha, you had to set your environment up. A lot of people do this. They'll set up a meditation space, or they'll go to the waterfall, or they'll have water running in their home, or they'll put on beautiful music. And all these things are really to get your body to relax. So what we've done is we've basically built a headset. You can also use just an app if you don't have the headset. And when you're listening, the body is interpreting these vibrations and frequencies. It's very specific. We have 5 different technologies in the headset. With sound, light, and vibration, all different ones, with language on some, music on others. And all of this goes in at one time and starts to create an environment internally, because everything we see in the world really isn't in the world, it's in our head. So, in neuroscience would tell us that we're making this whole thing up, and we can get further down that rabbit hole if you want later. But the whole thing is that it's all about how we perceive the world, so we want to create peaceful, relaxing environments to get our bodies out of this fight or flight and into more of the rest and digest and recover. And so that's where we specialize. But there's 3 different times during the day that people use it, like in your sessions. I love them because they're 10 minutes and people can use them very quickly, whether they need them in the middle of the day or in the morning. And we encoded those with a brainwave pattern called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. So this is about cognition, and breath work does that anyway. So now we're just amplifying that experience. And every session is kind of curated like that. Every session on the platform has a different encoding, because the brain, like muscles, if you do the same thing every day, then the muscles do begin to atrophy. And in the brain, they call it neural pruning. It thinks you don't need to do anything else. So it's trying to conserve energy. So we really want to exercise the brain. That's why we call it brain fitness. So I hope that's enough on that. And then we can just roll into something else.
Yeah, it's great. Neurofitness. And then it just talking, I want to just unpack a little bit of I've had some clients who have BrainTaps, and for anyone who hasn't seen the headset, it's amazing. It's this white, I wear it on the plane all the time. Like, it's on my neck all the time when I travel, because I'm still learning how to be a better flyer with less stress. And so it's so helpful, because you have so many options of tracks to listen to during takeoff and landing, and all the times I feel wild. But quite often it's happened half a dozen times where I'm wearing this white headset, walking through the plane, and someone will be like, "Oh, is that thing? What's that brain?" Or someone I heard in first class be like, "Oh, the BrainTap is here, and have you heard about it? I seem like more people are wearing it." So it's just it's so standout. It's so interesting. It's like very ritual, and I think there's something about, honestly, like use your headset if that's where you're at with your budget and lifestyle. with the app. And also there's something about the headset that almost is like layering on an effect of that I have it with me. It makes me feel a little more secure. But so that being said, I also want to, besides raving about that, I want to unpack a little bit of the question I get a lot, which is just, but Kristen, I don't understand exactly what, it's like, I've done biofeedback and neurofeedback, and like, this is brain fitness or neural training and neuroplasticity, just sort of, I think the landscape of that, if you could peel back a little bit of the layers at a 10,000 foot view of the differentiators there.
Yeah. So we're big believers in neurofeedback. This technology is based on biofeedback because back when I invented it, there was no neurofeedback. The word was not in the lexicon of everybody who's talking now. Now it seems like everybody knows that. So when you think about, we were looking at skin temperature, respiration, heart rate, and these are things that control our stress levels. And we know if we could get people in with warm hands, for instance, that's a biofeedback technique, then we know they have more alpha activity. It was more correlated to those activities than now we have science. So, it's a little bit different. Now we can actually hook people up to machines like our NeuroCheck or like an EEG machine, like the Wabi, and we can actually show them, hey, here's your brain right now, and here's your brain while you're doing BrainTap, and here's your brain after. So what we're seeing is that the brain responds to these things. Now, neurofeedback, which we think is very good, but it's like going to the gym. If you have to do it over and over again, and usually it's a 40 session protocol. And I teach this at Quantum University. So but what most of them don't do is while they're in the clinic 40 sessions over the course of maybe 10 weeks or something like that, when they're not in the clinic, what are they doing? Because just an hour of neurofeedback isn't going to make that big a difference. In fact, those of you that are out there that have done neurofeedback, you're going to identify with this. At the end of 40 sessions, you made some improvement. It was really good, but you paid $4,000 to $5,000, some people $10,000, and they tell you, look, you made these gains. Now let's schedule another 40 sessions. And so what I was doing, my dad was a Silva instructor. So those that know the Silva method, I grew up with that. So we would use GSR machines or galvanic skin response systems to train the brain to go to alpha. And so we've been doing this for me since the 70s, that when my dad got into it. And so what we're doing here with the neurofeedback part of it is that we don't need that. We do that to validate what we're doing, but we did a study. This was way back in the 80s with a group called Neighborhood Chiropractic. They had over 40 clinics in Phoenix, Arizona, and everyone who was a student went through this trial basis with us. And they just came out with a device called the Mind Mirror, which was one of the very first EEG machines. And what we noticed was when the first wave of people, and it ended up being over 1,000 people in the study, in the first group, about 50% of them would follow the algorithm perfectly. The second time they did it, we got another 35%. By the third time people did the algorithm, and this was way back, we had 100% of the people following the algorithm every time. So it was almost like, why do we need the feedback loop? It was like, we know it's happening. And now we have the NeuroCheck that shows physiologically what's happening pre and post. So people can, it's one of those things now. That being said, we do have in the works a sleep mask that will measure brainwave activity, and we're doing research while people sleep. And the research is on you, because if you're wearing the sleep mask, it's going to record your sleep score, just like an Oura ring is a good example. But we would have an algorithm of your EEG. Then we would replay that algorithm back into our system. And it would, if you came out of that algorithm during sleep, it would then use the light, sound, and vibration to put you back into that rhythm. And we believe it's all being tested right now in Brazil, but we believe that we can train people to sleep again. With 2/3 of the world not sleeping, this is a big issue. And the problem is you can't do it. It's like a state-dependent memory. In psychology, we know that like somebody might do really well. This is something we do when we're kids and we're playing pool, and we say, oh, I need a couple beers to play pool better. But the reality is we're not, but it's a state-dependent memory. At least we believe we are. You're probably not doing any better, but that's what we think. So an alcoholic might be able to drive their car, no problem, because they've been doing it so long. But then you take one of the pieces out of the equation, they can't do it because it's dependent upon their physiological state.
Yeah.
It's almost like when we try to look for a memory, we go, I know I had my keys somewhere. And then we walk the path that we had our keys. And then the brain triggers by going through that motion. So we also find that that's true with brain activity and brainwave activity or brain processing. So we want to improve that brain processing, but you have to do it while you're in the activity. Like we have to do it while you're sleeping, because you're not there when you're sleeping, but your physiology is. Your consciousness goes off to wherever we go when we sleep because we're not there. So that's part of it.
Yeah, and also how beautiful that you're innovating technology where you can sort of test it, see where it's at. And again, this comes back to bio-individuality, right? Right now, the headset is so prolific. And also there's a part of me that says, okay, what am I, we'll talk a little bit more about like applications for it, but I'm like, what is the context that I need right now? And then looking in the app to find the right thing. But if there was like an actual bio-individual specific exactly where you want to go, if sleep is your challenge and that's going on, I think that that's so cool, right? Because it's almost deciding for you. It's giving you the dose of the sweetness that you need in order to feel better and basically sleep in the instance you're talking about. So it's so cool. All right, well, fingers crossed on that. I love that. Yeah. And to speak a bit about application, I mean, I would say that the things that I use it for sleep. I use it for down regulating a lot. I run real hot and real alpha. And so that's part of the reason probably why I do so much breath work and cold exposure to get down regulation after I get out. But from an application standpoint, I think this is the other piece is that two things I see, I see the areas of sleep and stress that I want to manage. And I think there's other applications I want you to speak to that are a bit more specific. And then also this thing that for any of you out there who have never tried any kind of neurofeedback, there are moments that I listen to a lot of you because I just, I always think that people meet you at a conference and they're like, yes, Patrick, I'll do whatever you say. I listen to a lot of you because the pace of your voice and the cadence is always it just feels reassuring. And there are moments in the beginning where I've listened to newer tracks that either you've launched or I haven't heard yet. And you're saying something to me or someone on the track is telling me about something I'm going to think the next day or when I look in the mirror or something. And I'll do it before I go to bed. And I think to myself in the beginning of tapping to some of these tracks, am I really going to get up in the morning and put when my feet hit the ground or I look in the mirror, there's very distinctive phrasing. And I actually would doze off to sleep and it's 8 hours later. And like you said, my physiology has been in all different worlds of dreamland. And then I get up and my feet hit the ground or I get in front of the mirror and that exact thing comes back. And I just want you to talk a little bit about maybe that magic that like, there's languaging. I mean, you have this multi-tiered approach of what your sound and light and vibration, but there's some magic in the language. There's some magic in the putting it together.
Yeah, most people don't know that words change 2,300 different gene expressions. Whoa. So unfortunately, most people look at life, not you or I, of course, but most people out there, right? They look at life as a series of threats instead of a series of challenges. So if you wake up anticipating stress, then your brain says you have every right to be as stressful as you want to be. And so it basically does the same thing I'm doing, but does it in a negative way because that's our conditioning. They say we have about 80,000 thoughts a day and 60,000 are negative because think about it, our genetics, we survived everything from the Big Bang through the asteroid belt, through the planet, through the upbringing of whatever is our genetics, our physiology. It's been around forever. Now, our consciousness might not have been, or it could have been, I don't know that, but I know physiologically we were inside mom and dad, they were inside their mom and dad, and going back all the way to the beginning of time, and then whatever, when God created us, or however you're thinking about that. So all of that is playing into it. So let's imagine for a moment that they say that in psychology, there's a statement that 25% of the time you go unconscious. And people go, I don't know about that. I said, well, next time you're driving down the highway, look over to your right and to the left, and you're going to see a couple people that are unconscious usually. They're not there. They're just cruising along. And we've all had that experience where we cruised across town and then we don't know how we got there. We know we got there safely, but we were listening to the radio, talking on the phone, and we made it. So during those unconscious moments, like turning on a light switch, what if every time you turn on a light switch, you gave yourself permission to expand your consciousness and look at the infinite possibilities of all the four corners of opportunity? So your brain already knows there's four corners in a room. You're walking through there, you flip on the light switch, boom, all of a sudden your brain starts to add meaning to things that in the past we didn't give meaning to. Mm. Like when your feet hit the floor, your shoulders roll back, your chin rolls upward, and you go, wow, today's a new day. And you go after it. So the brain is literally queuing up. Now these things happen anyway. So what we're doing is we're saying, let's interrupt the old pattern. Let's put in this new pattern. And then you only keep what serves you, what works for you. When you look in the mirror, you say something positive to yourself. What would you really want to say if you could go back in time to that younger self and say, wow, look where you've come. Look at your life. You're doing great. Today's just an extension of all that greatness, and then again, just like that negative self-talk, now we have positive self-talk, in that they say that we get what we think about most. So if you're not, and I love, but for a friend of mine, I told him I was going to steal this and use it very quickly. He said, frequency is what we frequently see. So if you think about that, I thought, wow, that's pretty impactful, because that's the truth. And when I said earlier that we're making this whole thing up, neuroscience has proved that we only process 20% of our reality. We make up 80% of it. And they actually showed that in our vision, like when we're seeing the world, we process about 2,000 pieces of information every second, but our eyes send 10 million pieces of information to our brain. So what's going on there? It's unpacking reality, and it's basically basing that on our beliefs, our concepts, our encounters.
Right, faster than we can even experience it. It's happening.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a lot more happening inside our head than there is outside of it. Although we're processing all of it, we have the world's greatest biocomputer, it can do a lot of wonderful things. Most people, unfortunately, just let it run itself when it really needs guidance. We need to train it up. And that's why breath work is so important, why self-talk is so important, why hanging around, just hanging around people. Like when we're at those events with all the people that are up in consciousness and they're trying to improve themselves, we're actually, through biophotic exchange, sharing information on a light level with each other, because we all emit 8-10 nanometer light. So as we get close to someone, it's not just shedding these weird viruses that are running around. We're actually sharing energy and information. And the more at peace you are, the more in gratitude, the more you're in love with your life, yourself, your reality. They know that the brighter you are. It's not just a saying anymore. There are those energy vampires that walk in the room and, the light turns down. You don't want to be the one they say, oh no, the room just got a little darker. You want to be the one that turns up the room light. And so people that are positive upbringing. So when we're talking about really, and this is a factor of our nervous system. And a lot of people think the nervous system is our spine and but 70% of our nervous system is in our brain. So everything we do, from physical exercise to communicating to, all the things we do are actually working on our brain all the time. There's always that interaction going on.
Yeah. So I was just heard somebody talk about a stat that's like, it's an 80% or more like upflux from just all the sensory perception and everything we're doing into our brain. Like it's really, our body is dictating what our brain's going to do, but in a way that I want to call it subperceptual, right? And that to me was like, oh, because I always think about it sort of top down, but also we have this whole other rest of our meat suit besides our heads, that is like, it's being informed both ways, but that's heavily like cascaded upward, which is super cool.
Yeah, I think too that people don't understand that a lot of times these mental disorders that people have are physiological disorders. They're not mental disorders at all, because we're a complete thinking system or intelligent system by design. So that feedback system is feeding up and down the spine all the time information about how we feel, what we're going through. That's why we've all known people that became very positive and optimistic because they changed their diet or they started exercising. So it works better if you work on all three, work on your mindset, your food, your movement. Those three things need to be all there. And then I like to tell people, once you do that, you're ready to make the evolution to, spiritual consciousness, because until then you can't even think about that. I mean, if you're physically in pain or you're mentally distraught or you're eating junk, you're basically turning the channel to another frequency that's not going to give you the health and the harmony and the vitality we need to evolve and grow as humans.
Yeah. And it's so important to note that it's like it's a multifactorial, response system. And the fact that, this builds back to sort of usage occasion, right? For when BrainTap is getting used, or and usage and frequency. And by frequency, I mean repetition and consistency, not frequency. Like you so beautifully described, but there's something in the case I want to share with listeners that I think is to be made. And I think this comes from my breathwork background. And I just want to get your agreement on it, if that's what you feel, which is it took me many, many years of breathing in specific ways to understand that I could change my emotional state by changing my breathing. And I don't just mean calm down from a heightened state. I mean, feeling really shitty about myself or brokenhearted or, having imposter syndrome or having anger and like some of those things in not an exacerbated state, but that I could shift myself into a new way of thinking and being by just utilizing and training my nervous system. And that just means for me, that just meant by using the breath. And so while the practical applications quite often, and you speak about this on your website and other podcasts, can be for stress and sleep, there's something else about the emotional barrier that this technology can really help, right? It's like, it's such an untouchable, unfathomable, right? You're like, oh, my knee is hurt, or I'm trying to lose body fat, or other things that are going on, but the physiological connection to emotionality and nervous system. Like just what's that feel like to you?
Well, I think that the main thing that we're talking about is getting in tune with our environment, getting in tune with our thoughts, getting in tune with our reality. And so many times we process the world so differently when we're moving through it. And we all have that bias, what they call bias thinking. So we have to interrupt that pattern. So how do you interrupt that pattern? You can do it by jumping in a cold plunge, right? That disrupts the pattern, right? And people, they go into survivor mode. And sometimes that's what's necessary to unlock the nervous system. But most people are looking for ways to unlock their nervous system. They'll do it through drugs. They'll do it through addictions. It could be alcohol, whatever it is, or any other drug that's in. I'm not against, using things to explore, but when it becomes your only way, a lot of people, I think that everything we do is playing into what is our outcome? What's our outcome that we want? And if we know what our outcome is, then we structure our life around that. If we don't have an outcome, they say that someone who doesn't have a destination can always get where they don't want to go. You have to have a destination so you can figure out where you want to go, and that's part of the equation with brain tapping or with positive thinking, or everybody has a plan. They don't know that it's a plan. They think it's their thinking. And a lot of times it's not your thinking. It's somebody else's thinking. It's mom, dad, brothers, sisters, preachers, and teachers. They all had you were an experiment growing up. Yeah, totally. Now we get a chance to change that. It used to be that you couldn't change those things, right? And the main reason was, and this is where BrainTap, I think, has really excelled for people, is when we were younger, before the age of 7, we pretty much hung out in theta. We were in delta and theta, and we're just absorbing the world, and we're like a sponge, just believing everything, And I tell people, do you remember when you learned that Santa Claus wasn't real? That's when your brain kind of reformatted. It said, wait a minute, there's no Easter Bunny, there's no Santa Claus, and up to that moment, you lived in a world of wonder. And after that, you felt like, I've been lied to. Yeah. And so that cynical side of our nature started coming out until we had children, or we had brothers and sisters or nieces and nephews, and we start tricking them.
Totally.
But the whole thing is that there's a lot more we don't see. There's a lot more we don't hear. There's a lot more we don't experience. So I think all of these, the more we can expand our consciousness or our awareness of things, then we start to create our own rhythm, our own cadence, our own change. Too many times people are going so fast, they don't take time to recover. And I think that's my biggest mission, is to teach people it's okay to take 10 minutes and recover. It's okay to take 20 minutes and reboot. It's okay to listen to something before you go to bed, or do some kind of breath work like you teach. There's all sorts of ways to do it, but you have to do something. You can't just let the world happen to you, because it's also happening through you.
Yeah.
So we have to process it.
Yeah. And it's so important to, it's like there's a little bit of personal responsibility about being in our own emotional intelligence, and also navigating our lives that comes along with this, which is fun and a great exploration, and can be scary, surely, for people as well. It just brings me, I was just trying to pull up the study because I don't have it on hand, and I can put it in the show notes, but it just was popping off to me. I only sort of connected the dots while you've been speaking now, which is, there were a couple of studies done, I think that's very young in the research, that is talking about sort of using the third person, instead of like when we look in the mirror and when we're speaking to ourselves, saying like, you hear a lot of this in the affirmation world, right? I am abundant, I am healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wise, all of that. beautiful. And a little bit of research is starting to come out that it's like actually when we are spoken to or we speak to ourselves in the third person, is it third person? Yeah. Where it's like, you will do this. And I'm just sort of realizing that the tracks are all in that version and wondering is there a reason, have you seen that, heard that, and that's why it's landing that way?
Yeah. Well, from my own experience, affirmations only work if you're already there. So let me give you an example. If I say, I'm rich and abundant and I have my bank account, I'm doing really good, and, everything's happened, then that resonates with me. But if let's say my bills are due and I'm really stressing, I just lost my job, and I say, I'm abundant, you're actually amplifying that emotion. It's the emotion that gets amplified. The words are secondary. Yeah. So, what if I said, what would it be like if you were abundant? What would you see the world like? How would you listen? How would you experience it? What would you do in the morning if you knew each morning was a day to add to your prosperity, your abundance, your grace, your light, whatever it is? Now the brain loves questions and answers. So it loves questions given to it and gets answers. Then it's going to have questions. So if I can phrase something in a way that your brain has to answer it, now we've engaged this powerful mechanism that can go to work, because this has been known for a long time. The brain is a servo mechanism, goal striving. But if you don't put a goal into it, it thinks whatever's happening to you is the goal. Like if you're overweight, it thinks being overweight is your goal, because that's what you focus on all the time. Yeah. If you're a smoker and you get up in the morning and say, I really wish I could quit smoking, I just can't believe I'm a smoker. Then the brain goes, okay, you're a smoker. This is how a smoker would handle it. But these are not true things. The number one law of psychology states you can't be a behavior. But that's the biggest problem we have. And the thing that really bugs me, my dad went to AA and it didn't really help him. He was one of the 98% that it didn't help. The 2% that it works for, more power to you. But it doesn't work because they get up at every meeting and they affirm the negative. No one is an alcoholic. Nobody can handle alcohol. If you drink it, you just have to know that you're going to be a little more relaxed, maybe, and you're going to do some crazy things, and maybe you're going to have to make excuses the next day. But no one, even these race car drivers, right? They've done tests. So when you think about some of the things people affirm, like I'm overweight, people go, I have a weight problem. Well, they don't realize that the body is the hard drive, and it's listening.
Speaking to.
And it writes the program. It says, okay, I love it when people say, all I have to do is walk by the desserts and I gain weight. Well, the body stress, just one stressful event, the liver produces as much sugar as a candy bar. So if you get stressed out when you walk by the candy aisle, yeah, you're going to gain weight just walking by a candy aisle. So the body's an incredible thing. It's listening all the time. And it's not, I think nowadays, when I was a kid, in the 70s and 80s, no one believed this stuff.
But I was going to say, you've seen the arc of the what we might used to have called I say the woo-universe when I'm making jokes, but something that's more like energetic or woo, or it's like you've seen the arc of the research catching up. Yeah.
I mean, people used to say, positive thinking, all that. Now we know for certain, like our immune system, for instance, we need that more than ever right now to be active. They call it in psychology, the psychoimmunology that we have. That's how they study it. You have a thinking immune system. So if you're in a state of fear, despair, anxiety, stress, depression, your immune system gets suppressed. But if you realize that you have a powerful immune system, look at Wim Hof. I mean, he started this whole thing they inject him with poison. He just breathes it out of his body.
We know, it's amazing.
And he's taught other people to do it too. It's not like he's some mythical being from Mars that came here and did this. He's teaching people to, jump in freezing water and basically all these things that we're proving that we're superhuman, and that we have been convinced that we're not. We're convinced that we have to take a pill or a potion or, listen to our newscasters. And that's the only way we can survive. The reality is that we are imbued with, innate intelligence, and our body is divinely made and knows exactly what to do. We have to get out of the way. It's the biggest problem. Our beliefs stop that from happening more than help.
Yeah. And do you think that on some of the tracks that you have, there's some tracks that I think, I don't want to call them controversial, but I don't have a better word. Like there'd be tracks about weight loss, or like, do you have sometimes people like weigh in, pun intended, on that, where they're like, why are you telling people that they want to not be, weight loss is a thing for everyone? Or do you have moments? I mean, it's like you've created an app and a headset for people of all kinds, But I just
Right.
wonder if sometimes people come in and they're like, Dr. Porter,
Yeah.
like, what is this about? You know?
Yeah, I love it when I have an overweight person tell me, why are you telling people to lose weight? That's a negative way of saying it. And I go, well, one thing is that in psychology, we learn you have to meet somebody where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that you don't need weight loss. What you need is a health. You need to think about health because and the whole thing is driving them toward health because that's the higher goal. If you're healthy, I don't know too many overweight people that you look at them and go, wow, that person's really healthy. Now they could be. I'm not saying that they're not. I mean, we've tested people with our neurocheck and you would think that they were, I just had a guy at a convention in Vegas and he was shocked at how good he was. And I said, you're 32 years old right now. That's why you look like this. I said, pretty soon they're going to call the note. You're making a withdrawal against the future, So so it's always good to do it first, and get your body. Or I should say, it's always easier to maintain a house than to let it get ravished by a storm and then try to rebuild it. So we need to, build the house and keep the foundation and keep the workers busy, keeping it up so we don't have to worry if a hurricane comes that we're going to get blown over.
Yeah, for sure. And then how much of there's so much of your background that's like led up to this creation. And it's, I always think sometimes too, it's like overnight success, 10 years in the making, that's always the story. And I've had the opportunity of speaking with you on a panel and just being around you. I can see the level of passion and everything that you bring to the table. But just, do you credit one or two things like in your early years or like, I don't know, getting involved in NLP or hypnotherapy, or do you credit some of that to really sort of the power of your passion, like what's powering you?
I think the biggest thing is I actually wrote about it in my first book. I say I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic because my dad got help. I could be an alcoholic. I probably have the genetics for it. And if I didn't have the background in positive thinking and everything my dad took me through, and then he thought, a lot of parents, unfortunately, they do something that's good for them, but they don't share it with their kids because they don't think they're ready for it or they're not going to be liked. My dad said, the hell with that. Every night we did the Silva method together as a family and we learned to do that. And then he taught us how to do it for things we wanted to do, like sports. And then when I was older, I was never going to do this. I can tell you right now, when I was growing up, I was into electronics. I was a geek for those times, but I was also an athlete. So I love to meditate, and stuff. So I was always building things. That's back when you'd actually build TVs and radios and things like that.
I think men always were taking them apart. I don't know. The people I knew were like more interested in taking them apart and only had to put them back together because they took them apart.
Yeah, I know my son's like that. He finally puts them back together now. But in the process of this, but what I think helped me was my dad had a saying, you're either growing or you're decaying. So, and he was a big one. When I went to work for him and with him doing the Silva weekends, because every other weekend we were doing Silva. So you imagine I did it probably 100, 200 times. I don't even know. I wasn't counting. But you're in the room, he's teaching it, you're going through the processes, you're meditating. And then when I was introduced, and then when I started doing therapy, I was trained by a Dr. Paul Adams, who was a very famous hypnotist. He wrote the book, New Directions in Self-Hypnosis in 1961, and it's still at bookstores today. And luckily I mentored with him and he trained me. I bought that company and turned it into a 108 location franchise and then sold that in 2002. But along the way, when you have, like we had over 300 therapists who worked in the system, I could go to Richard Bandler, who founded NLP, and say, hey, I want you to train our group. And we would have our own training. We could bring him out and we would, there's so many, we counted up one time, this was years ago, there's been a lot more now, but I've been trained by like 68 different people. And that I could say added something. And when I go to these events, even the biohacking events, and that aren't really about psychology as much as just physiology, but when I'm there, I am learning all the time. I think that's the one thing that I'm blessed that I don't think I know everything, and there's so many people that know a lot more than I do about so many other things. And I'm one of those guys that I want to know everything. And so you can't, it's impossible, but you can get around people that do. And when you hear them lecture or you hear their story or read about it or listen to these podcasts where you're having, you're asking questions of these great guests and things like that, you're like, wow, you really open up. And I think so many people are so busy looking for their self-gratification that they've lost that learning because they think they've associated learning with negative association with school, where I loved school. I didn't like doing the work. I was an honor roll student, but I did it the most minimal time possible. I didn't like do extra, but because you had to have good grades to do sports. That's the main thing that motivated me. But then you get to college and you realize, hey, you better put some time in. So, what I always tell the kids is once you learn the skill of learning, your life becomes more fun, because there's no, you don't think, oh, I have this challenge in my life. Buddha said 6,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons. The only reason that you don't have what that other person has is you don't have the same thinking they have. You don't have the same education. You don't have the same background. So once you learn what they've done, you can do those same things and maybe even do better than them. And one thing I think is so many times people in their unhappiness, like they look at one person and say, oh, they were gifted with this certain thing. Like you said, I've been told, I'm on his 37-year overnight success. When you think about it, and I did it for me. So I believe you find something you love to do. There's a saying, most people know this, you find something you love and you make a business out of it, then you never work a day in your life. And I still feel like I'm helping my dad set up the Silva class. And, when I didn't get paid anything, but, maybe we'd get to eat out afterwards, if we were traveling to do it. And that was a big thing when you have 9 kids in your family. So, there were different ways that they motivated us. But I think the biggest motivation was every time I got to watch these seminar people have these breakthroughs. And I kind of got addicted to that. I think it's when you see other people winning and I was taught by my dad to that because he always celebrated that, at the seminars. So it was kind of a habit where a lot of people don't know that. They don't know to celebrate people. They always look at life as a series of challenges. Or they're a threat. Like if you're successful, I can't possibly be successful. But I used to do a class with my franchisees where I said, how much money's in circulation right now? I don't know what it is today, but back then they said there was enough money in circulation. If we were to play Monopoly, we'd all get $3 million. Yeah. But they say if we did that right now, the same 20% would get it back within 6 years because they have the consciousness for it. So
like to be able to manage it.
There's a study that shows people who win lotteries, 7 years after they win the lottery, they are more depressed and their quality of life is less than a paraplegic.
It's because they're not like planned or trained or prepared. Yeah. It's like really interesting to see. I've heard those studies as well. I want to talk about kids a little since you brought up your son and kids in general. I just think this is a tool that the family can use in many ways. I think ages and brackets is something I haven't ever spoken about with you. Just understanding is there a time that's like too soon or perfect or optimal, or like, are you finding it helping teenagers in some ways or what are the answers there?
Yeah. All the above, but I'll go into some detail.
Because I have a niece who's 13 and doesn't listen to my podcast, surely, but like my sister's like, we're rolling into those years, if you know what I mean, the teenage big shift and all of that. Right. Like, is there a way to make this cool tool for them that like can be like, yeah, I'm into it and it works?
Oh, well, with kids, what we usually tell them, you find out what they love to do and you make it something about that. Because we have all the sports programs, so that's an easy way to get people to do it. Mm-hmm. The other is that we have a whole accelerated learning program. So the parents will say, hey, if we could cut down on your studying and you could learn faster and better, then that gets them. But we've had kids as young as 1 year old or younger online where you see them crying, they have colic and they put the BrainTap on them and they stop crying. I would never think that was possible, but they're getting the frequencies, right? So they're balancing their brain and then they don't have colic anymore. But I believe 4 years old is about the time to start. And then we've done studies with people over 100. We did a study with centurions and we found that their brain changed in six weeks, 19% neuroplastic change, even in 100-year-olds. Cool. So, I mean, there's the brain. One of the things it's a lot of people talk about the liver being able to regrow, but your brain is more important than the liver, and the brain will regrow. So the problem is if we've had a traumatic brain injury or we've hurt it in some way, that we have to get the toxins out. And that only happens when you have level 4 sleep. So if you're not sleeping deep, then your body never turns on the glial lymphomic system, which is going to wash out those toxins out of the brain. And so they just get stuck in there. So, I mean, we did a study with a group with the red light therapy that we use. I know you're big one on the red. I bought your little red light therapy at any bit.
I love it.
And we know that red light therapy can bring vasodilation, blood flow, and circulation. So if you think about everything red light therapy does, we're doing that same thing, but we're only doing it in a very small way to the ears and through the eyes. But we want to get light into the brain. So if you can get somebody when they're down, unfortunately, and you show them how BrainTap works, then they like it. When we're doing events and they're tired and they do a 20-minute, even with a loud music like we saw at Mod.
They're like conked out. I'm always like, oh my goodness, this person's like out like a light, or they're like having moments where they're like, you're in dream state. You can tell in the chair.
Yeah. And they go, wow, I was able to do that here. What if you did that every day? And then if you show them because people don't realize what's going on. They just think they relaxed. They don't know that physiologically they retrained their brain. They got into a better brain state. They have more energy. And then when they start using it over time, they start realizing I can have energy. I don't have to be this person has to do coffee or tea or Coke or whatever they're doing to stimulate them, chocolate, sugars, things like that. Because that's the way most people will, stimulate to stay. When we've measured people's brains, the most frightening thing that happens since we've had technology to do that is we find that almost everyone outside of the biohacking community, I will say that they have really good brains when we're measuring them. The first time we went, we're like, oh my God, everybody's so good here. Nobody's going to buy this equipment. But what we found was everybody bought the equipment because they wanted to have a better brain.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Boy Scouts when they say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. That's what happened at biohacking. Because usually we're used to doing medical conferences, and you would be amazed at how bad most doctors' brains are. And
I'm not sure at this, but I think now I'm starting to see more and more from that kind of conferences. I'm working a little bit more in the conference circuit, not so much with doctors as much as sort of general population and people who are in offices all like hours and hours, 80-hour weeks or whatever. And I'm like very surprised. No longer am I surprised that they are just not taking care of themselves at all.
Yeah, it's like I stand up most of the day doing work like I'm standing up now doing this. Mm-hmm. So because I noticed my nervous system shutting down, and what happens is our body, the number one, there's 3 waves to wellness I talk about most of the time. One is you can't outthink a bad diet. So I don't care who you are, you can lie to yourself, but if you're eating junk, you can say you're alchemizing it or whatever, they think that but the reality is that those substances will win over time. But so we got to eat healthy. We got to do something to do that. And then number 2, we got to move and breathe. If we don't move and breathe, our nervous system starts shutting down. And that's why they say sitting is the new smoking, because our nervous system is not moving. And then of course we need to have some kind of brain fitness. Those are what I call the 3 waves of wellness. And, when Jack LaLanne started, and people like Kathy Smith started exercise physiology and all of that, people thought they were crazy. I remember in my high school, now nobody who's younger than 20 will ever believe this, but we actually had people petitioning to us not to put in a workout room because they thought it would stunt the growth of the kids. Because when I went off to college, they had workout rooms, right? And when I went back and coached at the high school, we wanted to have a workout room. They're like, that's crazy. These people are going to stunt their growth. They're not going to build the right muscles. And, of course that's not true at all, but that's the belief. And then, when we look at, people go, what would you, and I still remember my uncles from Iowa, because when I would go there to visit, I would be working out and they go, what are you doing? Well, I've got to work out. They go, well, just go out to the farm, just go out into the, of course, if you're working on the farm, you're probably working really hard, but most of us don't work on the farm anymore. A lot of the kids only have strong thumbs because they're using those controllers all the time on their computers. But I think that we're in a new time now. There are some negatives to the virtual reality, but the one thing I like when my grandkids are using it is they find things to do where they're standing up and moving and they're actually doing something. They're not just sitting on the couch, firing at people, or killing people on games that if you saw what that does to the brain, you'd never let your children do that.
Yeah. You can never say that enough, Patrick. If you saw what some of the video gaming systems I do to the brain, it's like, it's intense. And also I'm sure that there's parents that are like, I need a moment of respite. So like there's both sides. And also VR, I think that is the benefit of VR. As much as I get a little nervous about AI, admittedly, I'm like, the future is scary. But like there is something to be said for when you can like even like the Wii and all of these tools that are out there where you're like bowling and doing things and it looks ridiculous to an outsider, like you're moving and you're recently I was one of my friends has a big VR. I don't remember which one it is, but it's like it was so cool to be in this like different world. And I'm like, oh, this is great because we're actually getting functional movement, squatting or looking at things and that movement piece is such an important play for us.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure it out because every time I get my grandson over, he uses it. And I said, you're supposed to be teaching me how to use it. He's like came out of the womb knowing how to do these things. So there's a lot to learn. I think that I have some ideas on how to improve that. And I'm working with actually a company out of California that we're putting in a device. We're building now. Most gamers will not use it, but parents should use it. And what we're doing is we're hooking up through HRV while somebody's playing the game. If their HRV drops below a certain range, the computer shuts off and they have to do a BrainTap session and get their HRV back up. Then they can play again. So that's one way to get people to do it. We're trying to look. Can
you elaborate on that just a little? Because HRV is such a hot topic right now, and like how could doing a BrainTap session, how is that going to shift HRV state? Like, let's just put the dots together for people who are listening.
Well, HRV measures our regularity. And Mike Tyson says everybody has a plan till they get hit. That's why we all know, like Fred, we go, hey, Fred was so calm and relaxed. I can't believe he had a heart attack. Well, Fred should have got upset, or he should have done a cold plunge, or he should have walked across coals, or he should have exercised, get his heart rate. You need to get your heart rate up and you need to take your heart rate down. This variability means that you can adapt. And really what we're talking about is an adaptive nervous system. Mm-hmm. So what we know is the heart actually has 40,000 specialized cells called neutrino cells. These are actually brain cells. So the heart now, they know, and this has been verified by science. I just actually wrote an article about it that's going to be published in a neurological journal. But basically, our heart communicates twice as much to the rest of the body as the rest of the body does to the heart. So we can really say the heart controls the show, not the brain between our ears. In fact, a lot of people will argue that the second brain is your gut and your first brain is your heart. And this brain between our ears is like a Google tablet. It doesn't do anything. It's basically just a transmitter and receiver of information. Yeah. And so as we think about, and really every cell thinks. There's not a cell in your body that isn't, or every DNA strand, if you will, whatever it is, you're always adapting. So as we work on this with HRV, we can measure that. Now, the nice thing about like the NeuroCheck is that it also measures energy. So when you think about energy across the system, every cell has those energy stores, and we don't get energy the way people think. A lot of people think, oh, I got to eat to get my energy, or I got to get water. No, that you can do that. Obviously, we need to do that. We won't live very long without water and food. But the reality is that we get most of our energy from light and from breath. And, that's why the ancients called it pranic energy. There's energy in every breath that you have. And in fact, some of the rishis will tell you in their writings that tell you, you don't even know what to think in the next moment without the breath. So you think of that breath as giving you the information you need to make your next decision. So when you think of all negative emotional states, they're holding their breath. So if you do an HRV with somebody that doesn't have good breathing, it's usually very bad. It looks like a flat line, but it's not like a flat line, like your EEG is dead, but it just means you have no variability. So, and what that also means, let's say you get pulled over, or not pulled over, but you get cut off in traffic. So you get upset. Well, somebody who has a regulating nervous system, they'll get upset. That's normal. People get upset, but they'll get over it. And I love what Paramahansa Yogananda said. He said, the difference between children and parents, our children will get upset and get over it. Parents will get upset and keep talking about it. The kids are back playing, but the parents are fighting over why the kid was upset, and so we have to learn to let go of the negative quicker and get back to our neutral state or our positive. But it's okay to be upset. A lot of people suppress that and shows up then as a psychosomatic disorder like cancer or something,
Totally. In the physical body. Yeah.
The body is like, I tell people, your body is like a filament in a light bulb. It only can handle so much. So if you learn to regulate it, you can increase the filament. You can increase your capacity. And you say that actually in your sessions too, which is good. So when you think about the capacity, we can't teach people to be stress-free. Like people go, I want to be free from stress. Well, then you're not learning and growing and developing. What you want to have is the capacity to master that stress so that the level you're at right now is easy. And you have to build that capacity. You can't very few people are born out of the womb with the capacity to handle the amount of stress that we're under every day.
Yeah.
We're under an enormous amount of stress about who we are, what we think, how we think. All those things are playing into and feeding back into our nervous system.
Yeah. I talk about it a lot at the gun range, which is such a silly or odd analogy for me to make it's not a political commentary, but it's like when you learn how to shoot a firearm, you're practicing training at a range, because they say if you're not like a police officer or like when you're training for it all the time and you get into an instance, then it's like you perform 50% as well, as 50% as accurate, 50% as quickly as when you're like knowing it's coming and you're on the range. So it's like the same. Once in a while you hear about people there was a gentleman and his wife, and he's using a dry gun, and he's training to like pull a gun and disarm, the opponent who's like is his wife in that instance. And he's practicing, and then has, I don't know if it's a police officer or a military guy, whatever, but he like has an incident with someone that he like quickly disarms the guy and then gives the gun back because he kept practicing with his wife and then giving it back to her to do it again. And then he's like, oh, and he like disarmed him again and it was okay. But it was like giving the gun back to, it's like we perform under stress differently, like less so. And so this is the piece of the puzzle. If people are like, I just want to say out loud so people know too, like what would you say is like a good dosage? Like how many times? Because just like anything else, if you have a red light panel, if you have a BrainTap, if you have any of these tools and you don't work it into, Kelly and Juliet Starrett always talk about peppering these tools around the house where you'll see them, you need to be consistent in order for them to work. You can't say, I bought a BrainTap, everything's fine, I'm not going to use it. So what's the dosage?
If you have a physiological issue like sleep or anxiety and stress, you really need to start with 3 times a day. And we actually have a quick start guide right in our app. Mm-hmm. So the morning sessions wake up your brain. We call it digital coffee, because if you need coffee to function, you got to dysregulate your nervous system. I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy a cup of coffee. You can do that, but have it later. Don't let your biology control your biology. You mean when you put that in, now it's almost like reactionary medicine. You need to use your nervous system. That's where you get up and you do your meditation, you do your thing. You want to be with yourself for a while.
Yeah.
So for me, if I have my cup of coffee, which I usually have 1 cup, usually around 10 o'clock, I've already done I have a 2-hour ritual that I do when I'm home. And on the road, it's only an hour because, you're out late, you're doing things. But the whole thing is that the morning sessions are only 10 minutes. And that's why I love yours to do when I'm there. It's a way to re-engage. Your body should be waking up with cortisol, norepinephrine, all those things, waking you up normally. Now in the middle of the day, we want to do a reboot. Most people don't know that at 2 o'clock every day, your temperature drops 2 degrees. It happens around the world and it increases 2 degrees at night. So if your brain's dysregulated, it'll drop lower, and at night it'll go higher. So you'll sweat, you'll get night sweats. But if your brain's regulated, you'll just sleep right through it. And in the afternoon, if your brain's regulated, or if you do, these bodies were designed for the Serengeti. They weren't designed for Austin or New Bern, North Carolina. They were, they were designed for, we're out there with the lions and the gazelles taking a nap. That's what it's supposed to be. But we're too busy being busy. So we have to do that. And then, so we need to reboot the brain. We've actually shown almost that you can regain the same energy you had in the morning if you do that session in the afternoon. So if you're the kind of person that feels like you're running out of energy through the day, then setting up a 20-minute time, or if you're working all day, before you interface with your family and all that, just say, hey, I'm going to go in and change, do your 20-minute session, come out. You'll have a new morning, and you'll be able to be there for your relationships and for your family and all those things. And then at night, a lot of people can't sleep. 90% of the BrainTap users listen at night, and they can do it with just the earphones that they want, or they can do it with the headset, whatever, but it's designed to take them and drop them off into delta. Delta is the brain wave that we associate with deep level sleep. What they say is level 4 sleep is what you need to really activate that glial lymphoid system. So when our app got voted the best, our bundle, which is called Sleep RX, was voted in 2021 as the best sleep app at CES. It was because we gave it to everybody at CES. And they were using it in the hotel rooms, and when you travel. And
I've been there, and it's Vegas, and it's hard to sleep during the Consumer Electronics Show, and it's also it's a pretty astute award to get at that show, because there's a lot of technology there. So that's amazing.
Yeah, we love it. So you can, but I always tell people a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. So whenever you can fit it in, that's the best time. But once you've done the first 21 days, you can decide to continue on with that practice, or at least do it every other day, because your nervous system is going to reset every 72 hours. When somebody goes, why do we work out every 72 hours? Why do these people do? Well, because we found out that in the body's recovery, 72 hours is a very magical time. So the nervous system is, and we need to interrupt that pattern. When we interrupt the pattern of stress and we start adding in patterns of relaxation and patterns of acceleration, now the brain goes, okay, we're not on a downward trajectory. It's not really anti-aging, because science has proven that we should not age. If we could take the toxins out of our body and we could stimulate the body with the right light and the right energy sources, there's no reason for our body to age. There's the mythical chicken heart that was kept alive for 35 years at Harvard because they cleaned it and, fed it and kept it detoxed. The problem is toxins. How do we detox? And that's toxic thoughts as well as toxic environments, as far as toxic food. The more you can clear out and get rid of those toxins, the stronger and healthier your immune system will be, and your nervous system.
Yeah. And there's something also really joyful about there's a repetition in the positivity. Like, it's just, for someone like my background, I had a lot of challenges when I was younger, whether it was like body dysmorphia or whatever, but there's that lingering, like you said, about the ratio of negative to positive thoughts. So having the affirmation or the reaffirmation of the affirmations within the software is just, it's like game changing for sure. Like for me, it has been quite frankly. Somebody asked me once, is it addictive? I said, I don't know. I've been doing it since 1986. When I invented the first one. The answer is yeah. But it's easy. It's such an easy tool, and it's really wonderful to use, and it's so done for you. Like, I hate to just say it's a done for you service, but it's done for you. It's like, you don't have to have all the bobs and bits and bells and whistles and stick things on. You just put it on and go. And I do it everywhere. I can do it anywhere and everywhere. And the new app that you just launched, what's beautiful about it is that I find it to be a bit more like the navigation system for the user is just easy, that you have these challenges that you can just like get into and knock out of the park. You know where to go the next day or the next session. And that makes it really like a beautiful experience. So cool. I want to remind people 100 times in my intro and everything in this podcast about all the incredible deals that you guys are offering, and like the wonderment that I have gotten from both experiencing BrainTap and really leaning into it. I got my own, and now even recording tracks for you, which has been a beautiful experiment for me, or a beautiful exploration of how to layer those things in. And then you take them and you put the icing on the cake and put it out into the world. But I just want to sidestep and ask you just a little bit. I like to close down my show always by talking about, I recognize all the beautiful work that you're doing and how much you have passion and love for this. And I just want to talk about, is there another biohack that's like, or a wellness optimization tool that's like lighting you up right now in the world?
Well, I do. In the mornings when I'm home, I love it. I miss it when I'm gone, as I do. I have a Enlighten sauna at this clinic here, but at home I have a pop-up one, and I can do BrainTap at the same time with it. So I love that. And I just got a new one that was at one of the shows, and it works a lot better than the one that I had. So I'm really liking that. And when I'm out of that, I have a In Harmony cushion that I use that actually works with BrainTap. So it sends the energy through my body. I have a bed that does that, but now I have one that you sit like you're in a lotus.
Meditation with it. Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a meditation cushion. If you look up In Harmony meditation cushion, Craig, I was just with him in Vegas because I really want to promote that through BrainTap, because a lot of people want to do it through meditation. So what I do with that is we developed all of these different solfeggio frequencies. There's 10 of them, and we did them for 11 minutes, 22 minutes, 33 minutes, 66 minutes. And with that cushion, you can lay on it and you get the frequencies to come up through your body. And it's just it's really a game changer. And I love that. And so I can't take either of those with me on the road. So when I'm home, it's like I get to go, and I'll wake up. I don't use the alarm anyway, but I'll wake up an hour earlier than when I'm on the road, just so I can make sure that I get a chance to do those two things every morning.
Oh, that's amazing. Cool. And that's something that anyone can connect. If they have a BrainTap, they can set it up with the In Harmony. Cool. That sounds like fun. That's like, how many hacks can I stack? It's like the pillow and sitting on it and brain tapping and red light on my face, or doing it. I could do it on my back porch in the sunlight. I'm loving that. What a wonderful.
With Freddie, we met him at the Magnowave conference once, and I had him build a bed. Now they sell it, but I had them build me a bed. I have a bed here at the clinic that has PMF in it and sound therapy and BrainTap. So you can do all those things. And then we have a weighted blanket, so you're trying to get, and then that's the one when, that we do here at the office.
So amazing. Amazing. Thank you for spending so much time with me today and for educating the listeners and me. I learn something every time I'm around you. And this is another portal. You talked earlier about spending time with people who, light you up. And you are certainly one of those people for me. And I think that listeners, this is the age we live in, that we have the ability to be around people that light us up, even if it's through podcasting and interviews and audio. And it's a beautiful way for us to all get connected at such a deeper level with the people that we know and love. So thank you so much for spending this time with me, for sharing your story, for sharing this incredible tool, BrainTap. And am I going to see you at KetoCon?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So this will be out right before then. And then we'll be at KetoCon in the 20, 21, 22, 23, something like that of April. And we will be talking about all things beyond health optimization and all the new innovations that Dr. Patrick Porter continues to come out with him and his team.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
lovely. Yeah, for sure. Me too.